Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So it's late 2025 and you're in the market for an iPhone, but you don't want to spend top dollar on the latest and greatest. You start looking at the used and refurbished market and you stumble upon a really interesting choice. You can get a former flagship, the iPhone 14 Pro, for about the same price as a newer standard model, the iPhone 15. One has Pro in the name, the other has that convenient USB-C port, but which one is actually the better phone to buy and use today? That's exactly what we're gonna figure out. In this video, we're going to cover everything that actually matters in the real world. We'll talk about the design and crucially the display. We'll look at performance, especially now that both are running the brand new iOS 26. We'll compare the cameras. Is a real zoom lens better than newer software? We'll get into real-world battery life, the whole Lightning versus USB-C debate, and finally, we'll talk about Apple Intelligence and why the fact that neither of these phones has it might be the most interesting part of this whole comparison. Now for full disclosure, on my desk right here I have my gold iPhone 14 Pro and this really nice blue iPhone 15. And just so we're all on the same page, everything I say about this 14 Pro also applies to the bigger 14 Pro Max. The only real differences are, the screen size and the battery. Same thing goes for this iPhone 15 and the 15 Plus. It's really just a size preference, so my thoughts will apply across the board. It's also important to know that neither of these is my main daily driver. They're my backup and review phones, so they usually live in my bag or right here on my desk. I use them for testing new software like the iOS 26 public stable release that just dropped a few days ago, and for general use when my main phone is on the charger. This gives me a pretty clean, unbiased perspective on how they really hold up after all this time. So before that, let's just quickly bridge the gap and talk about what made these phones so special when they first came out, because it really sets the stage for this whole debate. When the iPhone 14 Pro launched back in 2022, it was a huge deal. I mean, this was the phone that finally killed the notch and introduced the world to the dynamic island, which is now a standard feature. It was also the first Pro model to get that massive 48 megapixel main camera sensor, which was a gigantic leap in photo quality. And of course, it had the features that made it a Pro phone, that incredibly smooth 120Hz ProMotion display and a dedicated telephoto lens for real optical zoom. It really set the blueprint for what a modern Pro iPhone should be. Then a year later, the iPhone 15 came out, and its big story was that the standard base model finally felt Pro. It inherited the dynamic island from the 14 Pro, it got the exact same A16 Bionic chip from the 14 Pro, and it even got that 48 megapixel main camera. But the headline feature, the one everyone was talking about, was the long-awaited switch from the Lightning port to USB-C. For the first time, you could charge your iPhone, your iPad, and your MacBook all with the same cable. It was a massive quality of life improvement that people had been asking for years. And that's what makes this comparison so fascinating. The iPhone 15 is basically a repackaged iPhone 14 Pro, but with a few key differences. Holding both of them in my hands, the difference in feel is immediate. The iPhone 14 Pro with its polished stainless steel frame feels dense and substantial. It has that classic heavy premium feel to it, weighing in at 206 grams. I personally love this gold finish. It's held up incredibly well over the years and still looks fantastic. The iPhone 15, on the other hand, uses an aerospace-grade aluminum frame, and it is noticeably lighter at just 171 grams. It also has slightly more contoured rounded edges, which makes it feel a bit softer and honestly more comfortable to hold for long periods. That 35-gram difference doesn't sound like much, but you really feel it in your hand and in your pocket. But let's be real, the single biggest difference between these two phones, and probably the most important factor in your decision, is the display. Both are gorgeous 6.1-inch Super Retina XDR OLED panels. They have the same resolution, and they both get incredibly bright, up to 2000 nits peak brightness, which is still fantastic for outdoor use in 2025. However, the iPhone 14 Pro has ProMotion. That means it has an adaptive refresh rate that can go all the way up to 120 Hz. Scrolling through social media, browsing websites, even just swiping through your home screens, it is just buttery, incredibly fluid and smooth. It's one of those features that once you get used to it is really hard to go back from. The iPhone 15 is locked to a standard 60 Hz refresh rate. Now, is it a bad display? Absolutely not. It's sharp, it's colorful, and it's the same refresh rate iPhones had for over a decade. But when you put it side by side with the 14 Pro, the difference in smoothness is Well, it's obvious. For a phone at this price point in late 2025, a 60Hz display is a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people, myself included. And tied to that ProMotion technology is the always-on display on the 14 Pro. You can glance down and see your widgets, the time, and your notifications without ever having to wake the phone up. The iPhone 15 doesn't have this. It's a smaller feature for sure, but it's another one of those Pro perks you'd be giving up. Okay, let's talk about performance, because this is where things get really interesting and, a lot simpler. Both of these phones, they are running the exact same engine, the Apple A16 Bionic chip. And both of them have 6 GB of RAM. This is super important because it means that for all of your day-to-day tasks, opening apps, browsing the web, multitasking, you name it, there is absolutely no perceivable difference in speed. They are equally fast. Just to put some hard numbers on it, I ran Geekbench 6 on both of these phones right here. My iPhone 14 Pro scored 2,646 on single core and 6,740 on multi-core. And the iPhone 15, it scored 2,626 single core and 6,538 multi-core. As you can see, those scores are basically identical, well within the margin of error. They have the same raw power. Now, both are running the new iOS 26, and I've got to say, I am really impressed with this update. Apple has made some huge visual changes. The new liquid glass effects and the new animations make older versions like iOS 18 feel, well, old. It's a big, refreshing leap forward. And on both of these phones, the experience is fantastic. Swiping between apps is fluid, everything opens quickly. That 6 GB of RAM is also a key factor here. On some of the older base model iPhones I've reviewed, the ones with 4 GB of RAM, I constantly see apps reloading in the background. With 6 GB on both the 14 Pro and the 15, multitasking is still great. Apps stay in memory longer, which makes for a much smoother experience. I will say, right after I updated to iOS 26, both phones did get a bit warm for the first day or so. That's pretty normal. The phone is just re-indexing all of your system files and personal data. It's settled down now. But yeah, for really heavy demanding games, they can still get pretty warm to the touch, but performance remains very playable. The A16 is still an absolute beast of a chip. Alright, let's talk cameras because this is another huge point of difference. Before we get into the photos, the big story in the camera department is this third lens. The iPhone 14 Pro has a triple camera system, including a 12 megapixel telephoto lens with 3x optical zoom. This is a real physical lens. When you want to get closer to your subject, whether it's for a portrait or just to frame a shot from a distance, this lens gives you a clean, sharp image with no digital trickery and no loss in quality. It's incredibly useful and offers a ton of creative flexibility. For people who are more serious about their photos and videos, the 14 Pro also supports ProRAW for photos and ProRes for video, which gives you way more control in editing. The iPhone 15 doesn't have a telephoto lens, it offers a 2x zoom option, but this is essentially a high quality digital crop from the center of that big 48 megapixel main sensor. Apple calls it optical quality, and honestly it's pretty good for a digital zoom, but it's not the same as a dedicated optical lens, especially when you compare it to the clean 3x shot from the 14 Pro. However, the iPhone 15 has some newer software tricks up its sleeve. For one, it shoots 24 megapixel photos by default, which are noticeably more detailed than the standard 12 megapixel shots from the 14 Pro, and the file sizes are still very manageable. It also has what Apple calls next generation portrait mode. This is actually really cool. The phone automatically captures depth information whenever it sees a person or a pet in the frame. This means you can take a regular photo and then go into the Photos app after the fact and turn it into a portrait shot with a blurred background. You can even change the point of focus. That's a really clever feature that the 14 Pro just doesn't have. Okay, now let's talk about something that affects us all every single day, battery life. And this is a great opportunity to use my two phones as a real-world case study. My iPhone 15 is about a year old now. I first started using it in October 2024. It has 202 charge cycles on it, and its battery health is still at a perfect 100%. As you'd expect, it easily lasts me a full day, and some of my typical backup phone usage without any issues. My iPhone 14 Pro, on the other hand, is now over 3 years old, and its battery health has degraded to 83%. For me, with this level of health, it definitely struggles to make it through a full day if I'm using it heavily. I usually find myself needing to plug it in or throw it on a MagSafe charger in the late afternoon. Now, this is totally normal for a phone of this age. A battery is a consumable part. The good news is that getting a battery replacement from Apple is a simple and relatively affordable process, and it can make the phone feel brand new again. So if you find a great deal on a used 14 Pro, just be prepared to maybe factor in the cost of a future battery swap. And that brings us to charging. The iPhone 15 has USB-C, the 14 Pro has Lightning, and I know what you're probably thinking, USB-C is faster, right? Well, for these two specific phones, that's actually not true. The USB-C port on the standard iPhone 15 is limited to USB 2.0 data transfer speeds. That's a maximum of 480 megabits per second. And guess what the speed of the Lightning port on the 14 Pro is? The exact same speed. Charging speeds are also identical. Both phones support fast charging at around 20 to 27 watts, which will get you to about 50% in 30 minutes with the right power adapter. So the switch to USB-C on the iPhone 15 is purely about convenience. It's about using the same cable for all your devices. It offers zero performance benefit over the 14 Pro's Lightning port. Okay, let's talk about Apple Intelligence. All the new AI-powered writing tools, the image generation, the super smart Siri that's integrated into iOS 26. Here's the simple, honest truth. Neither the iPhone 14 Pro nor the iPhone 15 supports it. The reason comes down to the chip. Apple says that Apple Intelligence requires the A17 Pro chip or newer to run the powerful on-device models. Since both of these phones are running on the A16 Bionic, they're left out of the party. So is that a deal breaker? For me, honestly, no. Not right now. You have to remember, Apple Intelligence, as cool as it is still in its very early days. It's kind of like a public beta. It's impressive, but it's not essential to the core iPhone experience just yet. And more importantly, we already have incredibly powerful alternatives that I use all the time for complex questions or writing help. I'm usually turning to apps like ChatGPT or Gemini anyway, which are arguably more powerful and more mature at this point, and you can use those on any iPhone. So while it would be nice to have, the lack of Apple Intelligence on these phones in late 2025 doesn't feel like a major loss, and it certainly shouldn't be the only reason you spend a lot more money on a newer phone. So just to quickly recap the potential downsides for each phone. For the iPhone 14 Pro, the main things to consider are: first, it's heavier. That stainless steel feels premium, but you will feel that weight in your pocket. Second, the Lightning port. It's not a performance issue, but it is one more cable you have to carry around in a world that's pretty much all USB-C now. And third, if you buy one used, you might be looking at a battery replacement sooner rather than later, which is an added cost. For the iPhone 15, the biggest consideration by far is that 60Hz display. In late 2025, it just feels dated on a phone. Second, you're giving up that telephoto camera. If you take a lot of portraits or you just like to zoom in on things, you are gonna miss it. And finally, while it has USB-C, just remember, it's not the fast version, so don't buy it expecting crazy fast data transfer speeds for your photos and videos. So after using both of these phones extensively, which one would I choose? For me personally, I still lean towards the iPhone 14 Pro. That 120Hz ProMotion display is just too good to give up. It makes every single interaction with the phone feel better. And I use the 3x telephoto lens all the time. For me, those two features define a better, more pro user experience. But I have to be honest, it is a tough call. Every single time I have to dig through my bag to find a Lightning cable, a little part of me wishes I had the iPhone 15 and its USB-C port. It's a real trade-off. So here's my advice for you. You should get the iPhone 14 Pro if you're someone who really notices and appreciates screen fluidity. If the idea of a 60Hz screen in 2025 just bothers you, the choice is already made. Also, if you're a photographer, even a casual one who values the creative flexibility of a real optical zoom and the option for Pro RAW, the 14 Pro is the clear winner. It's the more capable and versatile creative tool. You should get the iPhone 15 if convenience is your absolute top priority. If you've already moved to USB-C for your laptop, your headphones, and everything else, and you just want that one cable life, the 15 is your phone. It's also the better choice if you prefer a lighter device that's more comfortable to hold, and if you're more of a point-and-shoot photographer who would benefit from those clever post-shot portrait features and doesn't really use zoom all that much. But that's just my take after spending a lot of time with both of these phones. I'd love to know what you all think. For those of you still using an iPhone 14 Pro or an iPhone 15, how has your experience been? And if you're in the market right now, which way are you leaning after watching this? Let me know down in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.